long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. I hope you all had a fantastic Christmas, and welcome to the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. Today we're going to break down the other win from the Browns over the Cincinnati Bengals from Sunday. We're going to talk some other Browns news, and then we'll get into the weekend slate this weekend with the Browns having a chance to play some major spoilers in terms of the division and playoffs and their game against the Ravens. But I can't do this without my co-host, Jack McCurry of North Coast Sports. How was your holiday, Jack?
Oh, it was well, man. I had to work, unfortunately, but, I still got to spend time with my family and enjoyed a really nice Christmas. How was yours?
It was interesting. I'm sure if you guys follow me on Twitter, you've been able to see what's been going on, but it was as good as it was going to get. I'll put it that way. It was still nice, and I hope, like I said, I hope you all had a nice holiday for those listening. And we're going to get into another Browns win here. The Browns beat the Cincinnati Bengals 26-18. Baker Mayfield had another wonderful game. He was 27-37 for 384 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Jack, this is the first time that the Browns have swept the Cincinnati Bengals since 2002. I kind of foresee a lot of this coming in the future with the way the Browns are trending and with and how the Bengals are trending as well. What was your biggest takeaway from this game on Sunday?
Just that the Browns came back out against Cincinnati and just dominated them. I mean, obviously, you could tell going into the game, Cincinnati was banged up offensively and defensively, and the Browns were just on a roll. I mean, they had won, I think, their last 2 games, 3 out of their last 4, and 5 out of their last 7, and so on. But they just came out and put their foot on Cincinnati's throat and pretty much squeezed the life out of them for the entire game, up until the fourth quarter when Cincinnati got some garbage time touchdowns. But, the Browns just flat out dominated them on both sides of the ball, and it was nice to see. And, I mean, when you look at Baker, he started off a little shaky, but, he came out slinging and made some great throws. The touchdown, to Higgins, the back shoulder throw to Njoku for the touchdown, and then getting one to Darren Fells, who is, I don't think anybody expected him to be a reliable target for Baker, but Baker trusts him and, threw it in there like in a really tight window in the corner of the end zone, and Fells was able to make a play. So, Baker once again spreading it around to everybody offensively, and, it just shows, he won Offensive Player of the Week in the AFC this week. I can't even tell you the last time a Browns player won that award. So he was dominant. The Browns were dominant, and we came out with another W.
Yeah, I would tend to think that he's also a lock for Rookie of the Week as well. So, did you see his touchdown celebration after his throw to Darren Fells?
Oh yeah, that one. He said that he was talking to the media about it today, and he goes, "I wasn't making any kind of gesture." He goes, "I don't know what you guys are referring to," but I think anybody with a brain could tell what Baker was doing, and the fact that he did it right in front of Freddie Kitchens made it even more hilarious and amazing.
For those who didn't see it, I'll just say that he insinuated that he made a big boy throw, which he definitely did. That throw to Darren Fells was an extremely tight window. You could almost say that there really wasn't a window with that throw that he made. This was the second time that an opponent has faced Freddie Kitchens. This was the first time that we've had a repeat opponent. What do you think of how Freddie Kitchens was able to call this game and adjust to what Cincinnati was kind of doing early on? Because it took a while for the Browns to get going, but once they started to get going, things just ran smoothly as they have been over the last few weeks.
Well, I think it's apparent that, with Kitchens, like he sees the flaws that are in Cincinnati's defense, and he went ahead and attacked it. And, Cincinnati tried to stop him early. Obviously, it was scoreless for the first quarter for both teams. But, I think Kitchens probably has someone up there in the booth seeing what Cincinnati was doing defensively. And Kitchens, decided to, change some things up and, obviously got the points rolling and got the offense moving down the board or moving down the field. And, honestly, you look at it back in the first quarter, there was a big play. Higgins had like a 55-yard catch and run and put him down in the red zone, but it got called back for offensive pass interference. So it wasn't just that, the plays weren't working. It was just the execution. Obviously, there's penalties. There was, minor mistakes. Like I said, Baker started off, I think, like 1 of 4, 1 of 5. But then after that, they all made adjustments, and then the offense started flowing, and they were able to put points on the board. And surprisingly, they only put up 26. It seemed like it would have been like the first matchup against Cincinnati where they put up 35 on the board.
Kind of seeing what got them going was the trick play that they ran, the triple reverse that Landry ended up with the ball in his hand and uncorked one all the way down the field to Brashad Perriman. That play seemed to really get them going.
Yeah, definitely. And, Jarvis Landry, if people don't like his wide receiver skills, maybe try him at quarterback. That was the most accurate pass I've seen in a trick play in quite a while. He stood back there and launched it, and credit to him. He has a pretty damn strong arm to throw it 60 yards down the field to Brashad Perriman. And luckily Perriman caught it, because that was an unbelievable play. And like you said, I think it really sparked the offense, and they really started cruising after that.
Another reason they got the offense going is Nick Chubb was able to gash the defense quite a bit running the football. He had 19 carries for 112 yards. This week he broke the Browns' franchise rookie rushing record, which was held by, it was Richardson, right, that had it?
Yeah, Trent Richardson.
I think he only had a few more yards than Jim Brown did. So, Nick Chubb passed both Jim Brown and Trent Richardson as, the all-time leading rookie rushers. And, you couldn't get more opposite ends of the spectrum with those two guys. When you look at Nick Chubb, what do you see the significance of him being able to, pass those two guys, only being 28 yards away from 1,000 yards, and really, besides that one game in Oakland where he had those 2 long runs and had over 100 yards, he wasn't the full-time starter until week 7. What's the significance of what he's been able to do this year, running the football behind, what many thought was a suspect offensive line for until they made the switch to Greg Robinson at left tackle?
I mean, when you look at it on a platform like this, I mean, it's unbelievable. He's only started 8 games, and like you said, he's 28 yards away from 1,000 yards as a rookie, only starting half the season. I mean, that's a staggering accomplishment. I mean, when you look at the other running backs in the league, Saquon Barkley, 2nd overall pick, he started since day one. Phillip Lindsay was an undrafted rookie. They kind of eased him in, much like the Browns have done with Chubb, and he had 1,000 yards. And I think he's had a lot of receiving yards too, and he was undrafted. I mean, you look at Nick Chubb, and Pro Football Focus has him graded as the number 1 rookie running back over Phillip Lindsay, over Saquon Barkley. What he's done since taking over as the starter week 7 against Tampa, and he's been one of the top running backs in football. I mean, it's unbelievable to see what he's done, and we've talked about him on the pod, how he's tough. He keeps his feet moving, and there was a risk to the Browns taking him at the top of the 2nd round because a lot of people were unsure of him. The production was there at Georgia, but obviously the durability issues, the knee injury he suffered early at Georgia, but he looks like he's going to be a superstar in this league. And, he's very humble, he's very quiet, and he lets his actions on the field do the talking, and he loves football. And, they said he's like this in practice every day of practice. He's full go, and they had to tell him to slow down just so he doesn't hurt people. But, Chubb looks like he's going to be a special running back. I know a lot of people still wanted Saquon Barkley, and he's having a phenomenal rookie year. But, I mean, you look at it, what Chubb's been able to do in the last 8 games has been unbelievable. And, hopefully he gets the recognition he deserves, because while Baker Mayfield has played a very huge part in the Browns' turnaround, Nick Chubb should get a lot of credit as well.
He absolutely should. And, one of the things that strikes me most with Nick Chubb is the way he's able to finish runs. He's always moving forward. You rarely ever see him push back whenever he gets hit, and that's why he's been able to lead the league in yards after contact. He is such a fantastic runner. He's a hard runner. It's funny because we all thought that Trent Richardson was that guy, that would always finish runs, and he's a much bigger guy than Nick Chubb is, but Chubb is absolutely fantastic as a running back, and hopefully next year they could get him involved in the passing a little bit more in the passing game. But I think with what they're doing right now and what they're asking him to do, he should probably have over 1,500 yards if he would have started week 1, and that's incredible for a rookie running back. Looking at the defensive side, there were 2 players this week that really made a huge impact, and that was Larry Ogunjobi and Jannard Avery. Obviously, if you've listened to us before, we completely gush over these 2 players, and they always seem to they have a knack for being involved a lot. And Jack, when you look at these 2 guys, the way they're able to shine on defense against Cincinnati this week, it just gives you hope that if the Browns are able to add more depth to both the defensive line and to the linebacker position, that these guys can even shine even brighter.
Yeah, definitely. And, when you look at this whole defensive side of the ball, I think a lot of attention has been put on Myles Garrett, Joe Schobert, Demarius Randall, Denzel Ward, Jabril Peppers. And then, these guys kind of are back in the shadows, and, they should get a lot more recognition. I know a lot of the guys that are really in depth with this team and break down tape, they show people how much of an impact Larry Ogunjobi and Jannard Avery have. This past game, they had 4 tackles, 2 tackles were for a loss, and they each had a sack. And you look at them all season long. I mean, starting off with Larry Ogunjobi, this is his 2nd year. He's not really talked about when you talk about the top defensive tackles in football, and obviously those are positions with Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh, and Ndamukong Suh, obviously that's a guy that Evan Silva of Roto World compared Larry Ogunjobi to, and I don't know if Ogunjobi will ever get to that level, but this year he's been an impact player, and he's doing it right now with at least a partially torn bicep. It might be a fully torn bicep, but he's still going out there and playing every Sunday. He's got 49 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 15 QB hits. And then when you look at Jannard Avery, it was a 5th-round pick, and I liked him coming out of Memphis, but I didn't know what the Browns were going to exactly do with him. But he's been a beast as well. He's got 39 tackles, he's got 4.5 sacks, a forced fumble, 14 QB hits, which I think that stat's not talked about enough, especially when you're talking about pass rushers in the NFL. But, those guys, along with Myles Garrett and everybody else on that defensive side of the ball, I know that the stats aren't matching up, in terms of points allowed and yards allowed, but the Browns defense has some ballers, and they got some dogs on that defensive side. And like you said, they can add a few more pieces. This defense is going to make some noise in 2019 and beyond.
And when you look at Larry Ogunjobi, he's played almost 80% of the Browns' snaps on defense, and to me, that's a little too high. It has to do with the quality of the depth that they have behind them right now. But as we go into this offseason, we've discussed on how John Dorsey wasn't going to build this thing in 1 year. I can see going into free agency and the draft that we're going to definitely add more players along the defensive line, because I've preached on here. you can never have enough pass rushers. And, as you continue to, wanting to contend for a Super Bowl, you saw what Philadelphia did last year. They have, I want to say, 6 to 8 guys that can really get after the quarterback on their defense, between defensive ends and linebackers and defensive tackles. So hopefully this offseason the Browns can add more to that and really get this defense to where they want it to be. I guess one of the downsides to this weekend is that Denzel Ward suffered another concussion, his second in 4 weeks.
Yeah, second in a month.
So, it had to do with his poor tackling. And maybe Greg Williams was right with the way that he tackles. He tried to go high on a tight end, and that did not work. Denzel is not a very big guy. Is this something that we're really going to have to pay close attention to? Because this is his second concussion in a month, and once you start to have multiple ones, it becomes much easier for you to have another one. And the more you have, the more it affects you. And hopefully, it doesn't get to the point where he has to step away because he has too many. So is it just a product of his tackling technique, or is there something more at play here with his concussions?
I think it has a lot to do with his technique, but it's definitely something we're going to have to keep a close eye on. 2 concussions in a month already as a rookie. It's alarming, and it's something we got to keep an eye on going forward. Honestly, looking at it right now, I wouldn't play him this Sunday against Baltimore. I know the Browns kind of need him against the Baltimore offense just because he can tackle, but you can't, if he does clear concussion protocol, you can't risk him going out there and getting another concussion. A third concussion would be damaging to his long-term career and I think health. I wrote about it on the northcoastsports.com. 2 concussions already. It's crazy. And, the one guy I brought up was Jordan Cameron, and we all knew he had the talent to be a Pro Bowl tight end for years. He had 4 concussions in 6 seasons, and he ended up having to retire because of that. And, you've seen a lot more players retiring at an early age just because of what concussions and head trauma, the long-term risk now, and especially with CTE and everything that goes on with that, it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. And Denzel Ward, if he wants to be in this league for a long time, and I think all Browns fans hope he is, because what he's done on that field this season already is the 4th pick in the draft. He's arguably the top corner in this draft class, depending on who you ask. But he's been a stud, and him and Myles Garrett are the cornerstones of this franchise going forward on the defensive side of the ball. And if his career gets cut short because of concussions, it's going to be a blow to the defense. I think John Dorsey's shown he's been able to find talent, whether it's in free agency or the draft. But, to have a fourth overall pick go down early because of these concussions, it's alarming, and it's something he's going to need to work on in the Browns as well this offseason.
There's one more thing I wanted to talk about this game, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it's been talked about to death already. But after Baker Mayfield's long pass to David Njoku, in which he should have scored, I didn't realize how slow he is. He got caught behind from a linebacker, but as Baker was running down the field to go down and kneel the football to seal the game up, you can see him jogging very slowly backwards while staring at the Cincinnati bench. And we could all take one guess on who he was looking at while he was backpedaling and staring at this Cincinnati bench. Obviously, we figured the media would go after Baker and criticizing for that. Are you already tired of the media complaining about Baker Mayfield's antics on the field? And I really can't even call them antics because it's just competitive fire showing through, at least to me.
That's exactly what it is. He's got a competitive fire. He's got confidence. He's got a swagger to him, but he's not being it's being cocky, but it's not like he's doing it on purpose. I think he does this it adds fuel to the fire when people talk about him, when people say things about him. And Shannon Sharp was on Undisputed, said something. He goes, obviously Hugh Jackson said something about Baker and it got back to Baker, and that's why he keeps doing this. And, Baker, made his comments after the first Cincinnati game about how Hugh went down to Cincinnati real quick after getting fired, and Baker called him out for it, and then the media went after him and said that, well, the man's got to work, he's got to put food on the table. And obviously that was a poor excuse, because Hugh Jackson's getting paid $4 to $5 million this year and next year to not even coach at all. Like, he could have sat home for a while, but obviously Hugh wanted to coach, and Cincinnati was probably the only team that would hire him. And then now this week, Baker stares him down on the field, and I'm kind of agreeing with Shannon Sharp that I'm guessing Hugh said something. And I also think it has something to do with you going back to Hard Knocks when Hugh brought him in to tell him he was going to be the backup quarterback. I don't think Baker was respected by that, or felt disrespected by Hugh doing that and then appearing on national television. But, seeing all these media people like Colin Cowherd and Stephen A. Smith, and today TJ Houshmandzadeh said that if he was a defensive player, he would go cheap shot Baker Mayfield. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, Baker does talk, but he also backs it up on the field. And I think NFL players should respect him for that, because not only does he run his mouth, but he backs it up on the field. And I think it's funny that the media, says Baker's cocky and arrogant, but when Aaron Rodgers did the discount double check thing on the field, no one ever said anything about that. So obviously, it's different with every player, but I don't see Baker being any different than any other quarterback in the past that's been cocky, but because they all backed it up on the field, and Baker's doing the same exact thing.
Yeah, Baker was asked about it again, and he admitted that he did it, and he said, quite honestly, if you don't like it, whatever. I freaking love that. I just absolutely love his attitude, the way he plays the game. Some of the things he was doing, on Sunday to jack up the crowd. And, one thing we haven't talked about is how glorious was it to hear those Baker chants resonating throughout that entire stadium. And not just, quiet chants, but these chants were extremely loud. How awesome was it to hear that going through that stadium?
Oh, it was glorious. I mean, I remember Nathan Zagura saying on the radio he hasn't heard First Energy Stadium that loud in all this time he's been back in Cleveland working for the Browns. And that's saying something, because I remember 2014, it was pretty loud when the Browns were winning at that point. And then obviously, the whole Hoyer-Manziel debate got ugly, and we all know what happened after that. But I mean, that video you posted, that I think it was Tony Mandalone, the guy that runs Fresh Brew Teas, posted the video of the Baker chant, and we posted it on our Twitter account at 1085, and it's blown up like crazy. But just to hear that stadium chant Baker, it's giving the city hope. And we needed that when LeBron James left once again in July, and Baker's bringing that, and I think he's going to take it even above and beyond maybe what LeBron did during all his time with the Cavs.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously football is king here in Cleveland, no pun intended, and the Browns will always be number one, no matter how bad they are. You've seen the support through the terrible seasons that we've had recently. So obviously, when you're the leader of this football team in Baker Mayfield, you see how well the Browns fans respect guys like Brian Sipe and Bernie Kosar, among others. So obviously, the quarterback is always loved here, and for those chants to start up on Sunday, and to see the way that Baker Mayfield responded by just throwing dime after dime after those chants were going on, you could tell that he was feeding off of it, and he absolutely loved it. And one of the things that really didn't get too much publicity is Baker did a fantastic job before Christmas of going out with law enforcement officers. I want to say it was North Ridgeville or something like that, and delivering presents to people who really needed it. And I don't think that got enough media attention as it should have. And you could tell that he really likes his city. He embraces it, and to have the attitude that he has, I think it's representative of the entire fan base, to be quite honest.
Yeah, definitely. We were always talking about during the draft process, who was the right fit for Cleveland. I can honestly say 16 weeks into the season, Baker Mayfield was the right fit for Cleveland. We needed that quarterback that oozed confidence, didn't care coming to Cleveland, didn't care about that jersey that's now officially retired after Sunday's win. We needed a guy that came in here and was going to inject the city and the organization with a great culture, with a winning attitude, with a confidence. And Baker Mayfield's done that. And, the future's bright for the Browns organization. And as long as number 6 is in that building and out on the field being the quarterback of the Browns, I really like our chances that this thing's going to turn around for good for the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I'm all for if Hugh Jackson is the next head coach of the Bengals to completely clown the Bengals for the next 10 years with Baker Mayfield as our quarterback. So I'm excited for that, and obviously the rest of the Browns fans should be as well. I think we would have went a little bit longer than we wanted to on the game recap, so I think we're going to kind of blow through some of these news stories so we can get to the Ravens preview here in a few minutes. But John Harbaugh, the Ravens head coach, the Ravens put out a press release that he will be back next season. His contract does expire after next season, and they said that they will be working out a contract extension with Harbaugh. Now, there really weren't a lot of ties with him to Cleveland, but those rumors were starting to circulate that he could be let go, and obviously if he was let go, the Browns would consider him to be their head coach. Do you think that this is completely done with John Harbaugh, or could you see a scenario to where maybe an NFL team trades for him this offseason?
I think there's still an outside window. I won't believe that he's really staying in Baltimore until the pen hits the paper on that contract extension. I think it all could depend on what happens this Sunday against the Browns if they don't make the playoffs. I mean, you think Baltimore, and they're obviously making a big transition in the front office with Ozzie Newsome retiring and, a new guy stepping in that's been in the organization at some time. But I could see a scenario where a team, and I know Denver's been like the most linked team to Harbaugh, if they perhaps make a trade for him, if, the extension doesn't get done. Harbaugh's a good coach, and I think if the Ravens do ultimately release him from his contract, he'll be a new head coach for a team in like 5 seconds. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league. Obviously, things haven't worked out the last couple of years, but I don't think that's on him. I think that's on the fact that, the Flacco contract really hampered Baltimore's ability to build around him and be able to continue to pump out a Super Bowl contending team. They haven't made the playoffs in the last 4 years. That depends on what happens on Sunday. But I don't think Harbaugh is someone you want to let go. And obviously the Ravens have shown continuity, much like the Steelers have over the years, where they don't fire their coach after a 8-win or 9-win season. They've been willing to stick it out. So honestly, I think they will. But like I said, until the contract extension's announced, I think anything's open at this point.
In relation to the Browns, Jay Glazer said that the Browns are doing their due diligence when it comes to finding a head coach. They're currently making back channel calls for candidates. Adam Schefter said that the Browns are going to do a thorough search and that Greg Williams is absolutely a candidate to be the permanent head coach of the Cleveland Browns. So let me kind of spin it this way. There have been the talks of how that it was almost set in stone that Mike McCarthy was going to be here. That obviously isn't the case. Do you think that this is going to go on much into the offseason, or do you think that this is going to get resolved rather quickly after the regular season ends for the Browns this Sunday?
I would expect it to go not more than a week and a half. Like Glazer's saying, they're doing all the back channel stuff right now. I think they're getting their candidates in order. I think Greg Williams is going to be a candidate, and I'm going to say it right now, even though a lot of people have already said it. I think Freddie Kitchens is going to be a candidate as well, because Glazer, we talked about it last week, him saying that the Browns want to keep Freddie Kitchens. Well, I think at this point, the only way you're going to keep him is if he's the next head coach of the Browns. And I won't go as far to say that's my pick right now, but I won't be shocked within like a week and a half if after the season ends, if Freddie Kitchens is the head coach, because, when you look for that young offensive mind, we have it right here in Freddie Kitchens. I think he's 44 years old, which is still fairly young when you look at some of the coaches across the NFL. So it won't shock me if he's the guy, but also I think they will make a search out of this. They will talk to people. I think obviously they're going to make a call to Lincoln Riley. Dorsey's probably going to talk to some of the boys in Kansas City, Bieniemy, Dave Tobe. I'm sure there's some other candidates out there as well. Mike McCarthy, I'm sure we'll get an interview. There was a report I seen last week about Todd Bowles, potentially getting an interview, which a lot of people will assume that's a Rooney Rule. But if they do bring in a Bruce Arians, who I also think will get an interview, because I think he is serious about wanting to come out and coach for the Browns. So the Browns should, grant him that opportunity to at least come in and do an interview, where I could see Todd Bowles being the defensive coordinator, and maybe they'll keep Freddie Kitchens on and maybe have him be the head coach in the wings. But I would expect this thing to get done quickly. I won't expect it to drag out like they did with the Mike Pettin search and the Chudzinski search. I think Dorsey's got his list, and they're going to jump right into it once the game on Sunday ends and hit the ground running on the coaching search.
And the reason I agree with you on why it's going to move quickly, because this is the most attractive job to any head coaching candidate out there right now, I would think. So they're going to be able to pick from the cream of the crop when it comes to head coaches. So I'm with you. I don't see it going much longer than 2 weeks. If it goes longer than that, it would be because they're waiting to get permission to interview somebody that they really want on one of the playoff teams. So we'll see how it goes, and it will definitely be interesting from here on out to see how it shakes out after the season's over. Baker Mayfield, we talked about his AFC Offensive Player of the Week, but he was also a Player of the Year. He won a Player of the Year award from the media. If you wanted to talk about that one a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is now officially the Joe Thomas Player of the Year award. The local beat writers vote on this, and Joe Thomas released a statement today saying he was proud that Baker Mayfield was the first recipient of that award, and that's named in Joe's honor. And Joe talked about how he's excited for the future of Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns going forward. And I'm glad the media had common sense and voted Baker, but obviously I think the media knows how special Baker is and how much that how much he's turned around this organization. So congrats to Baker. Obviously winning the Joe Thomas Award should be a great honor. And, I see him racking up many more awards this offseason, because he has really been something, and his rookie season has been one of the best. And obviously he can make it a record setting year on Sunday against Baltimore.
If you were to put a percentage on him winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, what would you put that percentage at right now?
If it comes down to Saquon and Baker, which I think it will, I'm going 60-40 right now on Baker winning it. I mean, we talked about it, I think, on the last episode. While Saquon Barkley's having a fantastic rookie season, there's no doubt about that. What Baker has done, statistically for himself, but what he's done for the Browns, and we didn't even mention this is their biggest turnaround in franchise history, going from 0-16 to right now they're 7-7-1. The previous turnaround was 6 wins, which was in the 2007 season, and then 1 year back in the 70s. So, I mean, that just shows what Baker Mayfield's done. Obviously, there's been other pieces too, but the fact that the Browns have found their franchise quarterback, and I've already gone from 0 wins to 7 wins, potentially 8 in the first winning season in 11 years, that right there should lock him up the Rookie of the Year award, in my opinion.
I'm a little more confident than you. I think it's more like 80-20 that he's going to be the offensive rookie of the year. I don't think there's really any way that you can give it to Saquon Barkley with the way that Baker has played the season now. Obviously Saquon started at the beginning of the season, but I would say that Baker has definitely had the more complete season, and it's led to more success on the field for his team in terms of the win column. So I think that Baker should absolutely be the offensive player of the year. All right, let's get into our game preview with the Browns and Baltimore Ravens this Sunday. There's absolutely a ton on the line in this game, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But when you look at this game, originally this was a 1 o'clock game, and this game was flexed to prime time at 4:30. Jim Nantz and Tony Romo will be calling the game, and I'm really looking forward to listening to Tony Romo break down Baker Mayfield and talk about him in this game. And, there's obviously a good quarterback on the other side, too, in Lamar Jackson. Lamar is 5-1 as the starter for the Ravens this season. He replaced the injured Joe Flacco, and when Flacco returned from injury, they stuck with Lamar Jackson, and, obviously they've been rewarded. You kind of laughed at me during our divisional previews when I said that the Ravens were going to make the playoffs, and if they win this Sunday, they're absolutely in. So when you look at this team, obviously defense strikes them, it strikes the most fear into their opponents, but with Lamar, he's been able to do a lot of interesting things, and they've been running Jim Harbaugh's San Francisco 49er offense that they ran with Colin Kaepernick with Lamar Jackson, and it's been very successful. What do you think the Browns are going to have to do defensively to really shut down Lamar Jackson and try their best to contain him? Because it's certainly not an easy task to contain this guy.
You're going to have to force him to throw the football, and even that comes with some risk. I mean, last week against the Los Angeles Chargers, he threw an absolute dime to Mark Andrews on a 62-yard touchdown pass. But, Lamar Jackson's biggest weapon is his mobility and is able to extend plays and scramble and run the football. You look at the Ravens right now, they're the number 2 rushing offense in the National Football League with over 2,100 yards. And it's not just Lamar Jackson. It's Gus Edwards, who's another rookie. You look at these rookie running backs this year, there's been a lot of them already. Edwards, Chubb, Lindsey, Saquon Barkley, obviously. But, Edwards has rushed for over 600 yards as a rookie at 5 yards a carry. Lamar Jackson's their second leading rusher at over 600 yards, and he's averaging 5 yards a carry. So, when you look at this game, if Cleveland's going to win, they're going to have to stop the rushing attack. And, just looking at it, obviously the last 6 games, they have rushed for at least 160 yards or more in each game. The only game they didn't win was against the Chiefs, and they still ran for almost 200 yards and put up 24 points. So obviously their offense goes through running the football, and Lamar hasn't had to do a lot of throwing. He hasn't even thrown for over 200 yards in a game. Well, last week he did it actually against the Chargers. So if the Browns can force Lamar Jackson to throw the football, maybe you get him to throw some bad throws. He's not the most accurate, but he also hasn't thrown a lot. So if they can stop the run and force Lamar Jackson to throw, and that could, be in a position where the Browns create more turnovers. And obviously turnovers is what helped this defense a lot this year, and it set up the offense to put some points on the board. So honestly, to make it all simple, if you can stop the run, the Browns are going to have a really strong chance of winning this game.
The Ravens have a great formula to winning football games. You mentioned that they're number 2 in the NFL in terms of their rushing attack, and the Ravens are number 1 in terms of points allowed and yards allowed defensively. in their first matchup with the Browns, they held the Browns to 12 points, despite giving up 416 yards of total offense. So, this Ravens team is still really good defensively. They have been for many years. What are the Browns going to have to do with Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb and all the other offensive weapons to really attack this defense and convert those yards that they gained in the first matchup into more points this time around?
And honestly, it's going to be a balanced system. That's how it worked the first game. Running the football is going to be an extreme key to this game. You look at the first matchup, Carlos Hyde had 17 carries. They ran the ball extremely well. They ran it 30 times. So I would think, 30 is going to have to be that magical number. They're going to have to run the ball, pound it with Nick Chubb, who only had 3 carries that first matchup, run it, and set up the pass for Baker Mayfield. Baker had a pretty good game. I mean, he threw for almost 350 yards against this Baltimore defense the first go-around. He also threw it 43 times. So if he can cut those down and we can have a strong running effort, which, it's going to be tricky against this Baltimore defense, there's no doubt about it. But if Chubb can have a monster game and help set up the pass and Baker's able to spread it around much like he did in the first matchup where he had 4 different receivers have over 60 yards, including the big play by Derek Willis, who unfortunately won't be a part of this game because of the season-ending injury he suffered after this game, then the Browns are going to be in a good position. If, they are pass-heavy or, Baker makes a couple bad throws, it's going to be costly because this Baltimore defense is tough and they'll get after you for sure.
This game is, like I mentioned earlier, this game is very interesting because the Browns have an opportunity to really determine how things shake up in the AFC North. If the Browns beat the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers win, the Pittsburgh Steelers will be in the playoffs. If the Cleveland Browns lose and the Steelers win, if the Cleveland Browns lose, the Ravens win the division. Now, it is possible if both, say the Browns beat the Ravens and the Steelers win, they both could still get in, I believe. I think the Ravens might be able to get a wild card spot. But pretty much the Browns control how this is going to shake out. And, there have been many questions asked since the game on Sunday, since this scenario has played out. If you're the Cleveland Browns and you're a Cleveland Browns fan, who would you rather make the playoffs, the Baltimore Ravens or the Pittsburgh Steelers? Jack, do you want to answer that question?
I put this out on Twitter, and a lot of people are like, who cares? Just want the Browns to win. And honestly, that's at the end of the day, that's, we want the Browns to win. We haven't had a winning season since 2007. Obviously, that would mean that we want Pittsburgh to win, make the playoffs, because that means we have to win the game. So when I look at it like this, and I hate to say it, I want Pittsburgh to make the playoffs because that would entitle that the Browns beat the Baltimore Ravens. So either way, we're knocking out one of our division rivals out of the playoffs, whether with it's a win or whether with it's a loss. So it's a win-win situation, honestly, for the Browns, because they win and Pittsburgh gets in, or they lose and Pittsburgh gets out, and it's vice versa with Baltimore, obviously. So couldn't go wrong with any scenario, I guess. But at the end of the day, I'd rather see the Browns win because it's been a long time since we had a winning season.
Now, the most unlikely scenario is the Browns could win and beat the Ravens, and the Steelers could lose to Cincinnati on Sunday and miss the playoffs. But I don't think that scenario is going to happen. In terms of this game, ever since I've really understood what went on with the Ravens moving and whatnot, when the Steelers and Ravens play each other, I've always preferred the Steelers to win. I hate the Ravens more than I do the Steelers, and there's some kind of, I think, respect, because when the Browns were moving, the Roonies voted to keep the Browns in Cleveland. They voted against Art Modell moving the team to Baltimore. The Steelers organization wanted the Browns to stay in Cleveland, and I think there's some kind of respect for that. And look, for the first time since the franchise moved to Baltimore, the Browns have an opportunity to really stick it to the Ravens to cost them something. And when you look at it that way, I really want the Browns to win this game, and for obviously the Steelers to win theirs against the Bengals. A chance to knock Baltimore out of the playoffs and finally stick it to the franchise that should have been yours and took 2 Super Bowl victories away from the city. I think it's going to be a great thing this Sunday if that were to happen.
Absolutely. If the Browns beat the Ravens, it'll clinch our first winning season since 2007, and it'll be the first time we swept the Baltimore Ravens since 2007. And, when you were talking about how the Steelers voted no to block the move from Cleveland to Baltimore, the Steelers team also wore brown armbands, to show their support for Cleveland and the Browns. So, that's why, and I'm with you. When the Steelers and Ravens get together, I'm usually on the Steelers side of things, which is crazy to say, but, watching the Ravens, that's supposed to be our team. And it's not, unfortunately, but, hopefully the new Browns are going in the right direction, and I think they are. So that's why I would, honestly, because I want the Browns to win, but, to see, the Steelers get in over the Ravens would be even better.
See, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, I absolutely respect Pittsburgh. It's kind of like Ohio State, Michigan for me. Obviously, I would prefer both teams to be very good and to have those 2 games a season mean everything. But and that's why I've been somewhat happy that Michigan's played well, and it makes it even better when Ohio State beats them. I don't like the other team, but I absolutely respect the rivalry between the 2 teams. And when you are able to have a quality football game, it makes winning even sweeter, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, when you're talking about Ohio State, Michigan, I always, watching the games and like watching the Michigan games, and my dad gets heavy when Michigan's losing, and I'm like, I would rather Michigan be good. When you look at these games over the years, this past one, even though the Buckeyes destroyed Michigan, seeing 2 top 8 teams duke it out, that's what I want to see. 06, Ohio State, Michigan, my favorite game of the rivalry of all time, was 1 versus 2. I would love to see that every year and have the rivalry game mean something. Yeah, Ohio State's destroyed Michigan in the past, the last 16 years or so. But seeing both teams good and top ranked and playing for a Big Ten championship berth, or in the past was for a national championship berth or a BCS bowl berth, it means something more than watching Ohio State, who's dominant, against a 4-win Michigan team. Like, it's boring. I'd rather see both teams good and both teams slug it out. And that's what I want to see in the future out of the Browns against the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Steelers. Obviously, I want the Browns to be the superior team, but I also want to see a slugfest because that's what our parents grew up on, and that's what I want to see out of the rivalry.
And I would love for the Browns and the Steelers to play 3 times a year, twice in the regular season and once in the playoffs. How great would it be for that game to determine who's going to the Super Bowl? I think that would be absolutely fantastic. All right, let's get to our predictions for this Sunday. How do you think this one is going to shake out in the season finale for the Cleveland Browns against the Baltimore Ravens?
Yeah, this is tough. Honestly, when you look at it, Baltimore is a good team. I mean, they are right now in position to make the playoffs. They have the number 1 defense in the National Football League in terms of points and yards allowed. But when I look at it and I see everything going on again, I can't bet against Baker Mayfield. And, the media is going after him. And what does the media do? What does he do? He feeds off the media. And, he said it today. He goes, if you don't like what I do and what I say, whatever. He doesn't care. And that's what I love about Baker. He just doesn't care. And I don't think we care what the media thinks about Cleveland anymore, because this is a new Cleveland. And it started when the Browns drafted him number 1 overall. And I think it carries into Sunday, and it's going to carry into 2019. And I think the Browns are going to have their first winning season since 2007. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Baker makes more plays than Lamar Jackson does and proves that why he was the number one pick and why he's the rookie of the year. Browns are going to win this one. I'm going to say 21-17 and, a winning season in Cleveland for the first time in a long time.
Yeah. It's, and one of the points we really did discuss is how the Browns were really able to shut down the Baltimore offense, but that was Joe Flacco when they played the first time, and that game took pretty much the entire regulation and all of overtime to decide that one. So this is going to be a very tough game. I'm with you. It's going to be a low-scoring one for sure, and I think that the Browns are going to pull this one out. If I had to put a final score to it, I'll say the Browns 20 and the Ravens 16. I think it's going to be a really low-scoring one. And if the Browns are able to have a winning season, I think it'd be one of the better sports stories of the last decade. To have a team go from 0-16 to especially in the NFL, where it's hard to make a really big jump like that, to go from 0-16 to winning 8 games and being above 500 the following season. I think it would be an absolutely great story, and hopefully when we discuss the post game next week, we'll be talking about another victory. I forgot to mention that this was a 1085 victory pod. It's our 6th on the season, even though they have 7 wins. We missed one in there, but it's great to get on here and talk these victories, and hopefully next week we're talking about another one. Is there anything else? Did I forget anything before we get out of here?
No, sir. We covered it all.
All right, then go ahead.
As always, follow me on Twitter at jmccurrycle. Check out my website, thenorthcoastsports.com, for all the latest on Cleveland sports. And check out my other podcast that I do, the North Coast Sportscast. Hopefully we'll have a new episode for you out this week, previewing the upcoming Ohio State Rose Bowl matchup with Washington. Take it away, Anthony.
As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki, Joki. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and on Facebook at 1085 Gridiron. You can find our podcast on any platform that you listen to podcasts on, including iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. We would absolutely appreciate it. And with all that, like I said earlier in this podcast, I hope you all had a fantastic holiday. And hopefully you have a good New Year's as well. Be safe out there. Use a ride share service if you're going to be out drinking or whatnot, and be safe, because we don't want anything to happen to any of our listeners, because there's some fantastic things right around the corner with the Cleveland Browns, and hopefully we want everyone to be a part of that. So as we get on out here, go Browns.